Alright, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another video. Ukraine's been taking advantage of some of the issues in the Russian communications to do a little counteroffensive in the south. These are mostly localized attacks, but due to the paralysis of the Russian communications, they're growing in size and becoming harder to control. A few days ago, Russia lost access to using the Starlink satellites that were going above Ukraine. And at the same time, Russia's been pushing to get more people on an FSB-controlled communication network, so they blocked Telegram and I think just WhatsApp today as well. I'm not entirely sure how far Telegram was blocked. I saw some reports saying it was just calling, some were saying it was the entire app. But losing Starlink and some elements of Telegram in the same week have caused a lot of communication issues in the Russian front lines. A lot of military bloggers have been complaining about it, so I want to go over some of the ways that Ukraine has exploited this for their benefit. So Russia's main goal with their sort of southern objective is to eventually reach the city of Zaporizhia, but before that, they want to try to bypass the city of Orihyiv by coming around both sides of it, doing some pincer bullshit. The problem with Orihyiv is that the southern front has been pretty much static since 2023. Ukraine has some especially strong fortifications north of the city of Robotine and kind of in this whole area, but this has hardly even moved since their counteroffensive in 2023. After Russia broke the lines of Vuhledar, they've been doing this sort of wraparound strategy where previously the front line ran a little bit more through like south of Velika Novosilka, but once they bypassed it in one area, they started flanking everything, and this is kind of where we're at that current offensive right now. Ukraine's main goal is to stop them from getting past the city of Orihyiv because this front is so static, they don't have to dedicate too many troops to it because of how good the fortifications are, and losing the communication in this area has led to some local counteroffensives. So we can go ahead and get into those. We'll get into the meat and potatoes over here in a second, but I want to talk about one by Lukyanovsk. So this is the left part of the pincer that Russia's trying to do to get around Orihyiv, and they've been, I remember the front was pretty much stagnant around Kamyanske for a while, so thinking around like the past like 5-7-ish months, like this is kind of the progress that they've gotten. It's been relatively stable in this region, but the Russians were approaching the city of Lukyanovsk and doing multiple assaults there, but it looks like their toehold approaching the city's been pushed back and they had to retreat to defensive positions. This is good because of the geography in the region. You can see that there's a little river to the south here, which separates this kind of elevated plain from the other one that's right here. If the Russians are able to capture Lukyanovsk, they'll basically be able to flank the Ukrainian positions on this ridge here, which are currently holding the Russians at this river, so preventing that's in Ukraine's best interest. If we take a look at the satellite map, you can see that Ukraine is most likely holding their defense in this region by some trenches by these tree lines, and if they can hold those, they can prevent the Russians from getting a wider angle of attack to advance outwards from here. So this one's a smaller but decently important push, but we can go over here and take a look at some of the others. The Ukrainians liberated the settlement of Stara Ukrainka, which is a good development for the Battle of Huliapole. The city split about halfway down Russian and Ukrainian control, and if the Russians were able to take Stara Ukrainka, they would have one more settlement before they could cut off all the road paths into Huliapole, so this bought Ukraine some extra time to fight in the city. Ukraine's old axis of defense in this area was Orihyiv to Huliapole to Velika Novosilka, and this is the Russians' step 2 in dismantling this axis and pushing further in the south. The next area is that the Ukrainians crossed the Haichur River and pushed a little bit further into the fields and liberated the settlement of Dobropilya in this area. The main point of this is to combine with a push from the north up here to stop the Russians' line of advance along the Yanchur River, which is the main area that they've been pushing across. Ideally, what this would look like would be a push maybe into Ribne, somewhere around here, which would set the Russians back about 6 or 7, I can't say that, which would set the Russians back about 6 settlements or so. This would buy the Ukrainians more time to build fortifications in Pokrovsk, keep this area a bit more fortified, and just reduce some of the pressure in the region. Russia's main forces are concentrated in this western area, which is why there's been less progress, because their main goal is to push past Orihyiv in this area. But because they're mostly concentrated in the west, it left a decent area up north, a little bit less defended, which the Ukrainians were able to liberate Stepove and push past this little reservoir right here to get a little bit further in. As far as next steps go, I'd guess the Ukrainians would probably try to secure Verbove or Kalinivske, just to secure the flanks and to get a small logistical hub for a push into the center, and then combining from the north, they'd use their new foothold by Drobopilya to push a little bit further in and try to complete this pincer movement. The whole area up here, kind of relatively in this region, is kind of a gray zone. The effective lines of control are hard to map in that because of the drones and how hard it's been to control settlements. I think Ukraine was definitely right to use the cutting of Starlink and Telegram as a way to take advantage of some Russian weakness and confusion. I don't think the general leadership sees big sweeping counteroffensives like 2022, 2023. I don't think they see those as the main goal anymore. But of course, keep applying pressure, see where this can possibly develop, because you never know what you're gonna get. It's like a box of chocolates. It's Valentine's Day. I gotta get my girl some chocolate because I didn't pay chocolate child support this month. Now, just to wrap it up really quick, the Russians have closed this sort of pocket by Pokrovsk. This is probably going to be nearing the end of the Battle of Pokrovsk, which Ukraine was still holding out in the North City and some of the outskirts, making it more of a gray zone. But this pocket had been holding for a while, but they've just closed it now. The Ukrainians are still holding positions around Mirnohrad. However, with the loss of Pokrovsk, I'm not entirely sure how long this will be, what the fuck's the word I'm looking for? Sustainable, that's it. But wait to see what happens, and I'll clear up what happened in Pokrovsk in a couple updates. All right, so that's mainly it. I think I'm gonna try to cover Ukraine front updates at least once a week. Maybe a video every now and then about the overall strategy or the pushes or what's going on. I'm gonna try to focus on Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, a couple of some other areas, China. I want to do some different stuff with this channel, not just focus on Ukraine. But there we go. That's what's happening. All right, see you guys later. Thank you.